Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this English free taster lesson as we rapidly approach the start of our main course. Hello there, Neil does crying over AQA, true legend. Welcome to Mina, our mod for today. Charvel, hello there. How are we doing? Let me know that you can hear me, that you can see me, and let me know how you're doing. I'm going to run a little poll. How are you? Are you great? Are you amazing? Are you sensational? Or are you just fine? Do let me know. Looking forward to today. My main aim is to just give you a taster, a little taster of all of the things that we'll be doing, the kind of vibe that will be going down in year 9, the kind of things that we'll be doing in preparation as you're still not quite in your GCSE years, but of course your mind is probably starting to pivot in that direction. We're going to be focusing today on creative writing. That's obviously one of the key skills that we develop. Hello there, Jade. As young authors, because that's what we are. When you write a story, you are an author. As young writers, and as really young students of that fantastic subject, English. We're going to be going right up till around 9 p.m. this evening. So if you're spending your Tuesday night with me, thank you very much. Obviously, if you know other people who would benefit from this, if you've got friends, I'm sure you do have friends, let them know. Send them the link. Get them on. I would love to be able to teach them today. As I have always said, the more, the merrier. And as I've said before, the word merrier makes me think of merry. The word merry makes me think of Christmas. And summer is over. It was raining all day today. The water was pouring from the sky. And as such, it's time to say goodbye to those summer vibes. It's time to lock in. It's time to lock in. There's a little lock. There's the little lock bit. There's the key. What we're giving you today is the key itself, the key to your education. If you don't know me, and you may well not, my name is Alex Sirichkin, and I'm Assistant Head of English here at My Earth Space. I was the second teacher to join after Louis, who was first. And of course, we've recently been joined. We have a third teacher now, and her name is Eleanor. I have a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from Queen Mary University in London, Russell Group University. I was there 2010 to 2013. I have over 10 years. In fact, this is my 11th September. Hello there, Helen. Worked in 3 schools in London, and then a 4th school in sunny Swindon. I was one of the first examiners to mark the new, quote-unquote, GCSE. But I'm not an examiner anymore because I'm full-time here each and every single day in the wonderful world of My Earth Space. I was watching Alex's funniest highlights. Yes. Well, that should give you a taste of what we were doing last year. But of course, it's a brand new academic year. It's a brand new opportunity to excel in your classrooms, wherever you may be. And please do let me know where you are today. I'm streaming to you from just outside of the wonderful city of Bath. And where are you today? Please, let me know. I would love to know. Aylesbury, what a place. So, I'm gonna try and give you something. Nice one, Charvel, Reading, not too far from where I am. just along the M4 or the Paddington line, Great Western Rail. So I'm going to try by the end of this lesson to give you 2 skills that you can take into your classrooms, particularly around the world of creative writing. I've chosen a topic like this because I want it to be accessible to everybody. Towards the end of the lesson today, I'll give you an idea of the kind of topics that we study. I think it's important to remember you're in year 9. Because you're in year 9, you've still got plenty of opportunity and plenty of time to study and read widely. There's one thing that's probably a sad, quote unquote, sad thing about year 10 and year 11 is that you're very much shrunk in the scope of what you're studying. You do a Shakespeare, a 19th century, a modern text, but you just go over those again and again and again. And that's important because you need to study them and you need to know them well so that you can write about them in your exam. But you lose a little bit of that spread. And the course that I run here at My Headspace is designed to teach you GCSE skills. GCSE skills. Not GCSE texts. Okay? Our year 10 and year 11 courses are very much exam focused, covering the GCSE texts. But year 9 is an opportunity to build the skills without being limited, I guess, by only studying the things that you'll write about in year 11. So we're going to begin just by thinking about today what makes good creative writing. Okay, creative writing, it's one of the most important skills. I mean, I guess if you want to think ahead to GCSE, sort of 25% of your final grade in language GCSE is based around a piece of creative writing. So it's obviously a very important skill to develop. But can you just start to pop for me in the chat? What makes good creative writing? What kind of things are you looking for when you're reading that jump out at you, that engage you, that interest you? For example, to start us off, for me, it always starts with great characters. It always starts with great characters. Thank you, Jade. The structure of the story that you're reading, absolutely. I'm going to pop that there. Indu, welcome. I'm not quite sure what you mean by Sampso. Could you maybe expand on that a little bit? I'm happy to discuss. Charville likes that advanced punctuation. Okay, cool. I mean, I would say that's probably not the most common thing that makes good creative writing, but it is certainly important. Indu, Matthew, sensory language. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. So when I'm thinking about characters, I'm thinking about their complexity, how complex they are, their realism, are they relatable, their relatability, do they seem real to me? Thank you, Toka, Mocha, welcome, creativity. Good grammar, obviously very, very important. So when we're thinking about structure, I guess we're thinking possibly about the beginning, the middle, and the end. Does the beginning set it up? Well, does your story sort of establish itself as believable? Does the middle build tension? Does the end resolve, the issues that emerge, as it were? Start bad, end good, absolutely. In terms of advanced punctuation, semicolons, colons, we want the stories that we read to be technically proficient, which is a word, or 2 words, I guess, that just mean, you know what you're doing and you're doing it well. Creativity, for sure. I mean, I've got this little image here. If you think some of the things that are on there, all of these, I guess, could imply creativity. Are we talking about, strange worlds that writers kind of land themselves in? Are we talking about interesting storylines? Do we have a lot of different threads that ultimately all end up in one place? Thank you, Indu. Yeah, for sure. Emotive language. I'm going to take that one because I quite like that. I'm going to pop that down here. So sensory language is obviously very, very important. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but ultimately it helps us to experience, the text. Emotive language. I mean, I think that's often neglected, but what makes a good piece of creative writing? Emotions. Does it make you laugh? Does it make you cry? Does it make you jump? Does it make your heart beat faster? All of these are emotions or emotional responses that I for sure know for a fact I've experienced during reading. We might think about other things like, are there little puzzles within the text that we study? Is there some element of kind of chase, people being hunted or hunting? Are we in outer space? All of these things are important. And what I aim to do in a year of Year 9 education, as I've said, it's about building skills. Okay, we're building skills. Now, you might ask, what kind of skills are we building? Well, one of them is around creativity, and that becomes apparent both in our creative writing, which I think is obvious, which is kind of what we're going to work on today, our persuasive writing, so the way that we write to persuade, because you need to be creative if you want to turn somebody from yes to no, or from no to yes. As well as this, it's about creativity in regards to our analysis. So it's about building interesting ideas about stories. Hi DIY Pan. The main course starts next week on the 8th of September. That's a Monday. So the skill of creativity, right? Obviously, in its own right, through the course, we build up our skills of analysis. But the key thing, it's about an exposure to a wide range of texts. I want you to read things with me and study things with me that you wouldn't study in school, typically. I mean, it's not always going to be possible for me to land on something that nobody studies because every single school has their own little approaches, but generally the texts that I choose are designed to expose you to a wide range of text. I'm talking about texts from different eras, people from different backgrounds, texts that cover different experiences. My little quote is, those who read lead. And what I mean by lead specifically is they lead in English. The students that I've taught throughout my long career who ended up with grades 7 to 9, they've almost always been the students who've read widely. They don't just read Macbeth, right? They read Romeo and Juliet, they've read Othello, they've read The Tempest, etc., etc. They don't just read Christmas Carol, they read Great Expectations, even if they're not studying it at GCSE. Because every single time you read a book, you increase your understanding of the subject. Okay, and that's why, as I've said, our Year 9 course is all about skills, not GCSE texts. Okay, the GCSE texts will come next year. And when you come to read your Macbeths and Inspector Calls and Christmas Carols, you'll feel so much more confident because you've already attacked something and ingested something and engaged with something. So you will eventually be asked to write either a description of a scene inspired by a photo or to tell a section of a story about a given scenario. Those are the kind of two tasks. Now, what I tend to find in most schools, in all the schools that I've taught in, from year 7 and year 8 and year 9, before you get to year 10 and year 11, you sort of build these skills slowly through the year. We are at a stage now where, particularly with our creative writing, we really want to practice our responses. Okay, and I always think one of the best ways to do that is, similarly to how they do it in the exam, by focusing on an image as a stimulus, or by responding to kind of a story title. Essentially, in my headspace, we break it down into two things: the description or a narrative. That's what we call them. So either description or narrative. Right? So here's an example question. A nature blog is running a creative writing competition, and the winning entry will be published in its next edition. Write a description of a safari park as suggested by the picture, or write a story about someone meeting a wild animal. Now, my question to you today is, what would a winning entry about one of these have in it? So we thought about what makes good creative writing. But if we were writing for a nature blog that was running a creative writing competition, what do you think they would be looking for? What kind of things do you think they would be looking for? Beyond just like talking about the 5 sentences or pathetic fallacy. Obviously sense description, yeah. But I'm thinking, for example, things like, a kind of possibly a sympathetic portrayal of animals. They're going to be aware of the kind of importance of setting, subject terminology. I mean, you're not really going to be including words like verb in your stories, I wouldn't say. Probably because we're writing creatively. But yeah, definitely using ambitious adjectives, definitely using imagery. All of these things that people have said here, I will include on our page. Because you ain't wrong. So there, some good ideas. Now, the way that you're assessed kind of breaks down into two things. AO5 is about your ideas, and AO6 is about your spelling, your punctuation, and grammar. Now, this is out of 24. This is out of 16. Now, I would say, if you're thinking about the progress of school, one thing that's really important to remember is in English is that, how do I put this? The older you get, the more you're able to understand the complexity of the topics that you're reading. There's a reason why, for example, you wouldn't study Inspector Calls in year 7. And that's because in year 7, are you really going to fully be able to understand things like poverty, things like capitalism? I mean, of course, I've met some very intelligent year 7s, but their experience of the world is much, much smaller. In year 7, how much are you allowed out on your own? How much are you allowed to see the world? You're still a child. It's very different to being in year 11. You know, you're 16, 15, 16, you're about to end your time at secondary school. You should by that point have an understanding of the world. So there's a reason why we kind of hold back certain topics and themes. When it comes to creative writing, it's actually very, very similar. I always used to say to parents that getting better and better at writing, it takes time. It takes a lot of practice. If you're only sitting down to start learning how to write creatively in year 11 at the age of 16, you're going to have missed out quite a lot of opportunity. So when I speak to parents about what we're kind of aiming for, well, obviously at the end of year 11, I would expect students, Myers-based students, to be aiming for grades 7 to 9. To get a grade 7 to 9 for this question, you're probably going to want to be getting at least 20 out of 24 and 13 out of 16. Okay, that would be, I think, on the lower end, but you know, a fairly reasonable target. In year 10, you're probably looking at 15 out of 24, plus maybe sort of 10 out of 16. And that means if we're kind of going to grow and grow and get better and better and better, I would say that year 9s should be aiming for around 12 out of 24. And I'm actually only going to shorten a little bit, 9 out of 16. I'm not going to jump down to sort of 5 or 6, because that, in my opinion, is actually too low. 9 out of 16 is like a fairly solid sort of grade. It's about progression over time. I want to teach you the skills so that you can be the very best that you can be as you're approaching your exams in year 11. It's about building up the process, okay? To get a grade 9 at the end of year 11, you want to be moving up roughly a grade per year, okay? 7, 8, 9, okay? That's the kind of process that we're pushing ourselves towards. Okay, it would be similar that if you're aiming for a 7 at the end, you're probably going kind of 6, 5, right? Now, of course, you know, I teach to the top. I want you to succeed. But I think it's important that we think about ourselves on a journey here. A journey that's kind of starting here and ending here. It used to be that GCSEs began, Key Stage 4 began in year 9. You know, it's now shifted in schools generally, right? That sort of years 7, 8, and 9 is Key Stage 2, 3. And this is Key Stage 4. So, what are you assessed on? Well, firstly, your register is convincing and compelling for the audience, okay? And that means that you're making your audience feel something, that it's matched to the purpose of the question. You answer the question. We don't pre-prepare stories. We respond to what we're being presented with. I will make very, very clear to you that ambitious vocabulary is a very important part of the mark scheme. It's mentioned 3 times. That you're using good linguistic devices and appropriate sentences. That's the really important stuff to get a good handle on in year 9. Our course, by the end of year 9, will ensure that you've got approaches to build ambitious vocab, that you've got approaches to create effective sentences, and that you're writing compelling stories. So that when you begin year 10, you're ready to hit the ground running. Indu Mathi Pezel point evidence zoom in link. That's not relevant to creative writing. That's obviously a paragraph structure. Look, when it comes to paragraph structures, there's so many. Every single school has something slightly different. But I can come on and speak to you about that on our main course. So when we're thinking about description, so let's say we're going to answer the description question. Description is experiential. What that means is a reader wants to know what it's like to be there, okay? You want to imagine if this is your reader, okay, and they're reading your story, that they can actually imagine what it's like to be there, right? That they can imagine what it's like to be there. And how do we do that? Well, as some of you have already referred to, It all lies in the senses. It all lies in description that shows us what we can see as a narrator, what we can hear, what we can feel, what we can smell, and what we can taste. Right? Now, if you want the fancy terminology, we're talking about visual imagery, we're talking about auditory imagery, we're talking about the tactile, we're talking about what we can smell, okay, what we can smell, olfactory, and what we can taste, gustatory. Now tell me in the chat, please, what is the one that you feel most comfortable writing? What is the one that you feel most comfortable writing? You know, if you're sitting down, what we can see, yeah, I would agree, Jade. Neil does crying. Thank you, Tokamoka, Charville. This is genuinely where students are most comfortable, okay? But our course aims to help you build the skills in the other areas. And the way that we do that is very, very simple. We structure our description by splitting the image into 5 areas. So we call this section 1. Little hint, each of these become a paragraph. We call this number 2. We call maybe this section here number 3. We call this here number 4. And we call this here number 5. And what we kind of do, because this is part of our planning process, is that we make it very, very easy for ourselves by, in our plan, letting ourselves know which sense we will predominantly focus on in each paragraph. So we'll start with what we can see, because it's always the easiest, and get that out of the way. Then we will start with what we can hear. So the visual, sorry, I'll go for the fancy words because they keep that purple going. The auditory. Here we'll go for the olfactory. Here we'll go for the gustatory. And last but not least, we'll go for the tactile. And what that means is we now have 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs that we can write about, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 focuses. Rather than trying to describe the whole image in one go, you describe small sections of the image in a paragraph per section. Now that's for the description. Okay, that's for the description. Remember, description is all about bringing this or whatever image that you're given to life. I want to come away from reading that feeling like I was there, like I was entirely in it. Now, let's say you want to go for the narrative question. The narrative question is what, students typically tend to write. They want to write a story. Well, how do we structure our stories? Who would like to guess what each of these letters stands for? Pop your guesses in the chat. When we're thinking about how we structure narratives, we're thinking about the stories that we're writing. And remember, one of the key things is that there has to be some kind of development. Things have to change. These are the words that are in my mind. Things have to change. Right, we've got the ending and we've got the beginning. Right? So what do G and I stand for? Well, G is about your character's good fortune. And I is about your character's ill fortune. What that basically means is things going well, things going not so well. Now, people who have read a lot of stories, thank you, Charvel. I think people who've read a lot of stories realize that most stories follow quite simple patterns. One of the most classic stories is character begins life or story in a moment of ill fortune. Things aren't going well. But by the end of the novel or the story, things have gotten better. On the other side, we could say, well, things start well, things end badly. Okay? So those are two very kind of classic structures. Now, you do have some other ones. Of course, you have the stories where it kind of fluctuates, and you have stories where it fluctuates in reverse. It starts good, it gets bad, it gets good again, but ultimately it's terrible. I don't really have the time to go into the stories where not much kind of happens and things tend to be a little with maybe a little spike or two. So what my advice to students is, if you're going to write a story in an exam or in a lesson, to focus on one of these ones. Things are good, they end badly. Things begin badly, they end good. So, for example, if we come back to our question now, write a story about someone meeting a wild animal. You could maybe write a story, for example, if we're thinking about good fortune, about someone who is very wealthy, highly respected, right? Wealthy, highly respected. They meet a wild animal. They capture the animal, right? Because they're wealthy, they can do what they want. They feel invisible. We can think about maybe the animal escapes, right? It wreaks havoc. Okay? And at the end, it destroys the home of the character, right? Things started well, you were wealthy, you were knocking about, things were great. You captured it, you got too big for your boots, as they say, and they destroyed it. What could we do for ill fortune? How could we take a character from ill fortune to good fortune? Let me know in the chat. Remember, we're thinking about someone meets a wild animal. That's the kind of topic. Can anyone come up with a story idea where things start badly and end well when somebody meets a wild animal? I've got some ideas swirling around in my head. Let me know if you have any ideas yourself. Because that's really, again, another big part of our Year 9 course. Building ideas. Animal being aggressive. The animal could be hissing and attacking, but slowly and slowly getting more comfortable. Okay, I like it. Let's kind of go with that. Ill fortune. On a walk, you meet a dangerous wild animal. Okay, and we've got here, it could be hissing and attacking, but slowly, slowly getting more comfortable. You realize, let's go for a different color just so that it distinguishes itself enough. Realize the animal has a thorn in its paw, right? You remove the thorn. The animal does not eat you, right? It escapes. A poor man on the streets being attacked aggressively by an animal, but soon on, this man finds out how to tame it and has the beast in control at the end. Yeah, exactly. We take a wild animal and we tame it. So again, look, these are simple stories. I think it's often important to remember, that whether you're in year 9 or 10 or 11 or whatever it is, when you're given a piece of creative writing to do in an assessment or in a lesson, you've probably only got somewhere between, probably maybe 20 minutes, okay, but never more than at most maybe 1 hour. And even then, that's probably a little bit too much. Well, not that it is too much to be given, it's just, that's how much they might give you if they're feeling generous. We can't write, okay? You cannot write in, let's say, let's kind of take it into the middle there. Let's say in 45 minutes. You don't have the time to write, stories that are like volume 1, okay? Section A, epilogue, right? And that's where you start beginning. Because those kind of stories, well, firstly, they require then chapter 1, chapter 2, maybe right up to chapter 83, and then you'd begin the second volume, volume 2, and maybe in that one that has a pre-section, blah blah blah, because that's the kind of epic stories that students think they're going to be able to write. You're not going to be able to write the entire history of some, kind of noble and incredible warrior, who is here, to save his family from being attacked or kidnapped or something, right? You don't have the time to write that entire story, right? So we need to keep things small. That's why a story about a walk where you meet a dangerous wild animal, or one about capturing an animal and then it kind of ruins and destroys your home. That's a much, much easier story to write in the time that you have. Okay, so I want to show you an example of what this looks like. So I'm going to give you guys the choice here. I can either write the narrative or the description. Okay, you tell me which one you'd like me to do, and we'll work on that one together. So if we're doing the description, then we'll do this one. If we're doing the narrative, then I'll get you to vote again, and we'll pick one of these. Odd to, good to ill, or ill to good. Let those responses come in. Nice one, people. Keep voting. Oh, it's moving around. Got 9 votes. Let's see if we can get that to 10. Got 11 votes. Appears to be 16 people on the chat. I'll give it another 10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, cool. We're going with the description. So let me just pop this, because this is my plan basically, isn't it? This is how I'm going to kind of answer the question like this, right? So I'll pop that there, and let me give myself a little bit more room with the image so that you can really see what I'm kind of doing by just making this a little bit smaller and this a little bit bigger. There we go. So there we go. Now, we've got our structure. We're aiming for about 5 paragraphs, and each of those 5 paragraphs has at least one reference to the sort of given sense. Obviously, when you're doing this, if you're stuck, just come back to the visual. But this is designed in such a way that by the end of it, if you were to do this in 4, you would have mentioned at least a piece of visual, a piece of auditory, some tactile, olfactory, and gustatory imagery. And that's going to really show your examiner that you're thinking about how you're bringing the reader into the experience, because description is experiential, as I've said. So with the visual, we need to start with what we see. Now, what can we see in section 1? Let me know. What can we see in section 1? In this little bit here. A big tree. So we're going to start by describing what we see. slender branches wormed their way through the air until they soared like birds. Sorry, there was a big fly there. Above the land, swaying in the breeze and threatening to dismount. Upon them, in swathes of green, leaves hung tenderly, waiting for a break from the midday sun that shone so powerfully over the valley. Yeah, because that's where we are. So I've got two things there. One thing I always try and do with my writing, if I can, it's not always possible, but if I can, I try not to begin my paragraphs with the word the, or it, or a. Slender branches wormed their way through the air until they soared like birds above the land, swaying in the breeze and threatening to dismount. Sorry, I'm missing a word there. Upon the branches, in swathes of green, leaves hung tenderly, waiting for the break from the midday sun that shone so powerfully over the valley. The tree had been there for as long as anybody could remember. It was a key feature of the land, a majestic and beautiful part of nature, with dark tones upon the wood. Right? So again, everything that we can see. Hello, Param. I'm good. How are you? Set against the clear blue sky, whose... No worries, Justice, you're here. I'm not going to go for whose. What else? What flies in the sky? Who can give me a good description of a cloud? Who can give me a good description of a cloud that doesn't use the word fluffy? We don't want no fluffy. No fluffy. Sounds like I'm telling a dog off. No fluffy. I'm not telling a dog off. I'm saying no fluffy clouds. Set against the clear blue sky, white clouds, thank you, Mocha, appeared soft, as though you could pass straight through them. They egged their way, not egged, they shimmered their way across the sky, pausing only occasionally to block the sun. Okay? So that's our first paragraph. Let's have a little look. Slender branches wormed their way through the air until they soared like birds above the land, swaying in the breeze and threatening to dismount. Upon the branches in swathes of green, everything here is what we can see. Leaves hung tenderly, waiting for the break from the midday sun that shone so powerfully over the valley. The tree had been there for as long as anybody can remember. It was a key feature of the land, a majestic and beautiful part of nature, with dark tones upon the wood. Set against the clear blue sky, white clouds appeared soft, as though you could pass straight through them. They shimmered their way across the sky, pausing only to occasionally block the sun. Great, so that's our first paragraph. Now we move to our second section, which is the auditory. Now, what kind of things, should we just pop into the chat, please? What kind of things would you be able to hear if you were standing and listening? What kind of things do you think we'd be able to hear? Nice one, Hashir. Bubbling. Wind. Keep them coming. Maybe we'll start with bubbling. I like that word, Indu. Bubbling beneath the surface was a delicate stream that ran out of sight but echoed through the valley with the whimsical sound of water. A pause. Then a wind gust singing its way through the air. A powerful mixture of high and low tones. Nice one, Tokamoka. I'm going to come to this now. Rain. When rain fell, even rarely. No, let's go with rain fell, though rarely. And yet, when it did, the pitter-pat on the grass sent the animals into a lulling sense of laziness. With a quiver, the grass moved. The softest of whooshes against the earth. In the distance, I like that, Heshir, birds tweeting. The horn of a trumpet, is it a trumpet? Trunk. The horn of the trunk of the elephant. All of this set beneath the soaring sight, because we can come back to visual here, of the mountain that hung like a portrait over the beautiful land. So I've kind of taken a little bit of artistic liberty here. It would be quite difficult to describe the mountain. I guess if we wanted to, we could say something like, between the peaks, the wind created a sonorous boom. Not boom. A sonorous cacophony of sound as it echoed its way back to home. Okay? Sizzle. Nice one. Yeah, we got repetition. So let's have a look then. Bubbling beneath the all auditory. Bubbling beneath the surface was a delicate stream that ran out of sight but echoed through the valley with the whimsical sound of water. A little bit of alliteration there. Whimsical sound of water. A pause. Then a wind gust, singing its way through the air, a powerful mixture of highs and lows, tones. Rain fell, though rarely, and yet when it did, the pitter-pat on the grass sent the animals into a lulling sense of laziness. With a quiver, the grass moved, the softest of whooshes against the earth. In the distance, birds tweeting, the horn of the trunk of the elephant. All of this set beneath the soaring sight of the mountain that hung like a portrait over the beautiful land. Between the peaks, the wind created a sonorous cacophony of sound as it echoed its way back to home. Cool, so we got first, second, now we move to this. Now this is going to get interesting here because this is the animals. We've got the elephant, we've got the lioness, we've got the zebra, but what do they smell like? Who can tell me what these animals, if you know, I mean, you might have to hazard a guess, but what does an elephant smell like? What does a lioness smell like? What does a zebra? And in the distance, you'll see another giraffe there. What does that smell like? Because this is all about building that sensory imagery, isn't it? Building that sense of beauty upon the page. Mud. Okay. So we might say something like, let's bring a kind of, like poo. Yeah, thank you. I was thinking that too. Let's bring a reader in here. If you were here, you may find that whilst the sound was tremendous, the smell was something beyond recognition. As the animals lazed in the mud, the acrid scent of feces began to wallow around them. It was only when that rain came and washed it away that the calming scent of petrichor would echo around the valley. Then there would be peace. Then the grass would emerge, smiling and wafting that scent, that green murmur into the noses of those who passed. So I'm trying to build vocabulary. This is a word that I've been seeing doing the rounds quite a lot. Petrichor. Do we know what that means? Again, it was a very rare word, but now it's actually one that is kind of quite widely used, I think. If you're not sure though, it is the smell just after rainfall. That kind of damp smell. You know, it's been raining a lot recently, so when you step outside, you may well smell petrichor. So I think this could kind of give you, because I'm gonna sort of, I'm conscious of time. Yeah, it's like a damp smell. Well done, Indu. Sorry, Neil does crying over AQA. So in this final sort of third, because I won't have time to go through gustatory and tactile, you see that again, we bring in, it's actually a second person address there. You may find that while the sound was tremendous, the smell was something beyond recognition. It kind of acknowledges to your author, to your reader, what you're doing, but you're bringing them into the scene. Suddenly you can smell that grim kind of quite distracting scent, right? It's right there with you. Should we finish it off with the line about fresh mud smell? Then the grass would emerge, smiling and wafting that green murmur into the noses of those who passed. Then, finally, that fresh mud smell, so full of nutrients and beauty, that on another day you may be pushed to dive right in. Okay, cool. So I think it's kind of incredibly important. And one of the things that this course does is it's all about exposing you to great models. A model is an example. Okay, and all of my lessons, pretty much all of them at least, I try to show you an example of great writing, whether that's creative writing, persuasive writing, or analytical writing. You need to see models. If you see what's good, you start to see what works. It's also important to see that as a piece of teacher-led work. I just came up with this. Okay, I didn't prepare this in advance. I took some of your ideas, I combined them with my own, and I showed you how you can turn simple things into great writing. Okay, and that's kind of the purpose of the Year 9 course. It's about building those skills. Skills are the most important thing you can build in English. So with that in mind, have you enjoyed